You are watching history unfold, and most Americans have no idea it's happening. Around the world, countries from Kenya to Sri Lanka to Panama are quietly walking away from the US dollar and borrowing instead in China's yuan. For decades, the dollar was the backbone of global finance, the foundation everyone trusted. But now that trust is breaking down. Under Trump, borrowing costs have climbed, investors are nervous, and holding dollars has started to look like a dangerous gamble. What we're seeing now is the early stage of a global financial panic. Before we dive deeper, take 5 seconds. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with friends so they can understand just how big this story is. Here's why this shift matters. When governments carry heavy debts in dollars, every swing in the currency can become a shock. A small fluctuation suddenly makes those debts far more expensive to repay. Leaders everywhere are looking at that risk and choosing a different path. That's why loans for highways, ports, and rail networks are moving out of the greenback and into the yuan. Borrowing in Chinese currency comes with lower rates, steadier repayment terms, and less exposure to the dollar's wild swings. And the reports arriving in just the past few weeks confirm it. This isn't a slow drip, it's an accelerating trend. Moody's has already warned that more than a dozen U.S. states are slipping into recession. Illinois, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, all once industrial powerhouses, are now flashing red. The slowdown isn't abstract anymore. It's visible across America's industrial heartland. Trump's tariffs were sold as a way to rebuild American industry. But instead of reviving factories, they've revealed just how fragile the system really is. In Iowa and Nebraska, soybeans that once shipped by the ton to China now sit unsold. Farmers are watching their crops rot, not because of weather, but because their biggest buyer has turned away. In Ohio and Michigan, steel mills that briefly restarted when tariffs hit are closing again. Jeep, Ford, and Stellantis have all cut jobs. Coca-Cola has closed 5 factories in just 5 months. And coal towns in Pennsylvania promised a revival are sinking deeper as renewables and imports undercut them. The result is entire communities hollowed out. Families face unemployment, local businesses collapse, and once thriving towns become economic ghost zones. Flags and campaign slogans can't cover mortgages. And a dangerous question is emerging. What happens when a generation of workers realizes the dream they were promised was never real? The pain doesn't stop at the factory gates. Trucking companies lose contracts, diners and shops see customers vanish, and housing markets collapse as families leave in search of work. Consumers everywhere are cutting back. Spending is shrinking, credit card defaults are rising, and wages aren't keeping up with inflation. For many households, rent, groceries, and utilities consume the entire paycheck. This is the hidden cost of tariffs. The damage circles back and hits American families hardest. But looming over all of this is a much bigger danger. The very thing that gave America global power, the US dollar, is losing its privileged position. For 70 years, the dollar wasn't just money. It was trust. Governments, banks, and corporations used it because they believed it was stable. If you needed capital in Nairobi, Budapest, or Buenos Aires, you borrowed in dollars. That system shaped the modern world. But today, it's cracking. Countries from Hungary to Kenya are borrowing in yuan instead. Panda bonds in China, dim sum bonds in Hong Kong. They're raising billions without touching the dollar. Some are even converting old debts into Chinese currency. For emerging markets, the math is simple. Dollar loans now cost over 5%. Yuan loans cost barely half that. And with the Federal Reserve signaling more cuts under pressure from Trump, volatility in the dollar looks set to grow. For countries already stretched thin, the dollar has become a moving target too dangerous to chase. Meanwhile, the yuan is steady. China's vast export machine and strict currency controls give borrowers predictability. Kenya, for example, slashed its borrowing costs nearly in half by switching a large share of its debt into yuan. For leaders trying to balance budgets, that's not ideology, it's survival. Beijing is offering exactly what many nations want: cheaper, safer financing. Washington, by contrast, is offering tariffs and threats. The irony is striking. Trump's tariffs were meant to box China in. Instead, they've boosted China's role in global finance. While Washington drains trust in the dollar, Beijing quietly steps in with alternatives. America's leverage as the world's banker is slipping away. And this is where it gets even more dangerous. Washington is still trying to project strength. Trump's trade team is preparing new tariffs, even a threat of 100% duties on Chinese goods if Beijing keeps buying Russian oil. On paper, it sounds tough. In practice, it's reckless. Consumer prices are already rising. The CPI jumped 0.4% in August alone. If tariffs double, the cost of electronics, clothing, and household goods could skyrocket, hitting families already struggling with higher rents and food bills. China, meanwhile, isn't standing still. Its exports to Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia are climbing more than 20%. Its digital yuan is being adopted in cross-border payments. And its control over critical resources, from rare earths to battery components, remains unmatched. If Beijing decides to squeeze supply, American industries from defense to smartphones could grind to a halt. And America's biggest corporations are caught in the middle. Apple, Tesla, Nvidia, companies that once built their future on China's scale, and consumers, are now fighting to survive in a hostile market. Apple's iPhone sales in China have plunged by more than 30%. Regulators are nudging consumers toward Huawei. Tim Cook has rushed to Beijing to reassure officials, even as Apple shifts assembly lines to India and Vietnam to reduce risk. Nvidia is selling downgraded chips to skirt US sanctions, but its CEO warns that cutting off China entirely could cripple the entire American semiconductor sector. Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory, once a jewel, now faces aggressive competition from BYD and other local EV makers. Even Starbucks and McDonald's are losing ground as patriotic consumers turn to domestic brands. This isn't just about profits. It's about survival. If Apple stumbles, if Nvidia is locked out, if Tesla loses dominance, the shock will ripple across Wall Street, pension funds, and retirement accounts. The fallout would touch millions of ordinary Americans who depend on those companies' stock values for their savings. And here's the most sobering part. This contest has only just begun. America's economy is slowing, its currency is losing ground, and its corporations are caught between Washington's tariffs and Beijing's control. China, meanwhile, is building new markets, new alliances, and a new role in global finance, one bond issue at a time. So the question is simple. If America's corporations can't hold on to China, and the dollar is no longer the world's safe bet, can the US even save itself? Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown useful, give the video a like, subscribe, and share it so more people can see how the global economy is changing in real time. This story isn't ending here. The next chapter could reshape the world order, and you won't want to miss it.